If you're waiting for an Express Entry invitation to apply and stuck under 500 points, this episode's for you. Hi, I'm Brooke Finley. I'm a Canadian immigration expert and founder of Navio. We're the first digital platform to make expert immigration strategy affordable. In this video, I'm going to walk through different scenarios and break down how the different factors in the comprehensive ranking system, which is used to award points in Express Entry, can impact your CRS rank. Now, I'm not going to tell you something you already know. Express Entry points are high, and you're looking for a way to increase your points and competitiveness in hopes of getting an invitation. And my hope is by the end of this episode, you'll see how different levers like French, foreign work experience, and completing a Canadian education credential can help boost your score. I'm going to walk through different scenarios, and I will share the spreadsheet that I use in Navio HQ so that you can apply it to your own circumstances. And if you're new here, Navio HQ is our completely free portal with all the tools, templates, and guides that our experts use to support people like you. So go on over to the link in the comments and access Navio HQ. As I said, I'm going to share the tool I'm using today, and you can apply the same logic and exercise to your own situation to understand how these different levers will impact your situation. But first things first, I want to do a refresher of the comprehensive ranking system factors, or CRS factors. And these are the criteria for which you get awarded points. So if you're new here, the CRS scores are awarded once you create a profile in Express Entry, and that score is ultimately going to dictate whether you get invited to apply to Express Entry. And what we never know is whether your score will be high enough. We have to look at the distribution of points across profiles in the pool and the trends in the minimum rank needed to get invited to apply in the most recent rounds of invitation. Another factor playing into whether or not a score is competitive enough or not is immigration levels. And every year, the Government of Canada, IRCC, sets immigration targets, and those play into how many invitations are issued and ultimately how many people become permanent residents through the Express Entry system. And if you want to learn more about the fundamentals of how Canada's immigration system works, you can check out our episode on Canada's immigration system explained with the link here. So, who are the elusive candidates who are still being invited to apply in Express Entry? We're going to create an avatar today and walk through a couple different scenarios of what must be true in order for your Express Entry profile to have a 500 plus ranking and position you for success in Express Entry system. First, let's cover the CRS factors. Points are awarded to the principal applicant, and if you're someone immigrating with a spouse, a married spouse or common law partner, their qualifications can also be factored into your CRS score. We'll run through this here. You can see on my screen that the first section, the first factors are for the principal applicant, the core and human capital factors. Points are awarded for age, level of education, official languages proficiency, and Canadian work experience. Next, if you are immigrating with a spouse or common law partner, points will be awarded for their level of education, language ability, and skilled work experience in Canada. Next are skills transferability factors. This includes education and foreign work experience combined with your Canadian work experience and language proficiencies. Finally, additional points are awarded if you have a brother or sister who is a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, if you have French language skills, if you have a Canadian post-secondary education, and if you have a provincial or territorial nomination. I want to dive into these a little bit further to show you some key considerations that you need to make when you're deciding between, do I learn French? Do I get more Canadian work experience? Or maybe do I study in Canada or leave Canada to get foreign work experience. In Section A, Core Human Capital Factors, we have Canadian work experience. And I will show you in the ministerial instructions. Ministerial instructions are law, and these instructions define exactly how points get awarded. So you can see here, there's the points breakdown, but what is most relevant here is the definitions of Canadian work experience, what counts and what doesn't count. So Canadian work experience is full-time or full-time equivalent for part-time work acquired in the 10-year period preceding the date on which you are awarded the points. So you'll notice here, if you're a Canadian experience class candidate, your eligibility is dependent on skilled work experience you acquired in the last 3 years. But for the purpose of CRS Express Entry points, the relevant work experience, it falls within the last 10 years. Additionally, full-time work is defined as 30 hours per week. And the requirements here in Section 7 are very important when you're considering which lever to exercise in your situation to boost your score. So of note is that a period of employment during which you were a full-time student is not included in the period of work experience. So points are not awarded if for periods of full-time skilled work experience in Canada while you were a full-time student. Self-employment is also not eligible work experience for the purpose of acquiring CRS points. Now for skills transferability. This is your education and foreign work experience combined with your language results and your Canadian work experience. First of all, as you can see from the public-facing website here, that there's two sections, education and foreign work experience, with a total of 100 points possible. But what is critical to understand is that for the education and foreign work experience sections, a maximum of 50 points is awarded for a total of 100 points in this Section C. Take, for example, education. If you have post-secondary education, strong language skills, and at least a year of Canadian work experience, technically you might be eligible for up to 100 points, but you will be awarded a maximum of 50 for this subsection. Now, in this section, points are awarded for combination of language and Canadian work experience with foreign work experience. And that foreign work experience has to be skilled, tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. It has to fall within the last 10 years, and it has to have been paid by wages or commission. So it cannot include volunteer work, unpaid apprenticeships, or co-op work terms. Now, in additional points, you can receive points for completing a Canadian education credential. And this section on the public-facing website lacks the detail that's incredibly important for somebody who is deciding whether or not to invest in paying international student fees to study for the purpose of increasing their Express Entry rank. So I'm going to show you in the ministerial instructions exactly what must be true. First of all, 15 points are awarded if you have a post-secondary education in Canada of at least 1 or 2 years. And 30 points are awarded if you have a credential that's 3 years or longer. Here are the criteria for study that will actually count toward points in this section. So points are assigned if you studied at a Canadian educational institution that is located inside Canada, and if you completed a program that was at least 8 months on a full-time basis. And you must have been physically present in Canada for at least 8 months of the study, unless Section 3 here applies and you were studying between March 1st, 2020 and August 31st, 2022. The ministerial instructions go on to describe eligible credentials. So an eligible credential is a degree, diploma, certificate, or trade or apprenticeship credential from a Canadian public post-secondary institution or from a Canadian private post-secondary institution that operates under the same rules and regulations as Canadian public post-secondary institution. And that will vary by province, can be verified with the provincial body responsible for designating private post-secondary institutions. Further to the above, the following credentials are not eligible. This includes programs in which English or French is a second language amounted to more than half of the program, credentials obtained by distance learning, where distance learning accounted for more than half of the program, and credentials earned while on scholarship that requires you to return to your home country after studies. As you'll notice, if you choose to study, any work experience you gain in Canada in a skilled occupation while a full-time student won't count for CRS points. And if you choose to continue working full-time in Canada to gain more Canadian experience points, you can't study remotely to gain points for Canadian education. Okay, all right, let's dive in and run through some scenarios to help anchor this information into some concrete examples. All right, let's dive into some examples. I'm going to start with someone who is in Canada with a year of skilled work experience and a high school education. They also have a year of full-time skilled work experience outside Canada that falls within the last 10 years. I've also assumed that the person is 30 years old, so they receive 105 points. They get 30 points for their high school education, and I've assumed that they can score CLB 10 or higher on the English language test for a total of 136 points. I should add this person is also single. They have not done a French test. They have 1 year of Canadian experience, 40 points. Since their highest level of education is high school, they don't get any skills transferability points for education. However, they do get 38 points for skills transferability from their 1 year of foreign work experience. That's combined with their strong language scores and their 1 year Canadian work experience. So 25 points for 1 year foreign experience and CLB 10, plus another 13 points for foreign work experience and 1 year of Canadian work experience. That brings us to 349 points. This person would be eligible in the Canadian experience class, and in those draws, we can see, I'm just on the round, looking at the previous rounds of invitations. So for Canadian experience, we can see that the draws have consistently been over 500 points since May 31st, 2024, which means the individual in this scenario is very unlikely to get an invitation to apply. It's not absolutely out of the question because we did have a draw back in 2022 or 2023 with a minimum score of 75. That had never happened before. It has never happened since. But it's still worth putting your profile in the pool because anything can happen. But we need to explore opportunities to increase this individual's CRS points to give them a higher chance of getting invited to apply. So, scenario 2. In this scenario, the person I have assumed is able to continue working for another year in Canada. So they have 2 years of skilled work experience in Canada at this point now, because they've worked for another year. And during that year, in addition to working full-time in a skilled position, they also learned French, and they're able to score level 7 in each of the language test areas. So I've assumed, again, that they're 30. In fact, let's update that because they are going to be a year older. So they will actually get 99 points here. So it'll be 31. And still 30 points for high school education, 136 for English. Now we get 12 points for French. They now have 2 years experience in Canada, skilled, so 53 points. Still no skills transferability education points. But now that we have another year of Canadian work experience, that boosts the skills transferability foreign work experience points to 50. And there's an extra 50 points for level 7 in the French language scores combined with strong English language scores, which brings us up to 430. Now, looking back like we did at the Canadian experience class draws, still not enough. However, as you're probably aware, there are draws specifically for candidates with French language skills. And when we look at the more recent French language skills draws, we can see that the minimum score is now down in the 400s, hovering in the mid to high 400s, sometimes even high 300s, low 400s. So our candidate now with a score of 430 points, although they're older and they have lost some points for aging, they gain enough points for the extra year of Canadian work experience and the French language ability that they're in a much stronger position to get invited to apply. Still not a slam dunk, so let's look at what else we can do. This scenario here is for an individual that decided they, instead of learning French during their next year of work, they are going to gain another year of skilled work in Canada. And while they're doing that, study online and get a post-secondary diploma or certificate of 1 year. And in this scenario, I've assumed that that credential will not be eligible for Canadian education bonus points, because I'm assuming that this person's going to continue working full-time. So to add Canadian experience points, Canadian work experience points, they cannot be a full-time student at the same time. They can still study, especially if it's online. A study permit's not needed at a Canadian institution, or perhaps the study is done at a foreign institution, remotely, online. Either way, what it does is, again, I had to adjust the age here because we're a year older. Now we get 90 points for education. And same English scores, no French in this scenario. Increased the Canadian work experience points to 2 years again. And now we get we get the points in the skills transferability education for the combination of 1 year credential or more with strong English and 2 years of Canadian skilled experience. So 50 points there. And again, same 50 points for the 1 year foreign experience with 2 years of Canadian work experience and strong English. That puts us at 478. And again, just like the scenario, the first scenario, that's still not quite enough. So at the moment, if you're someone with a high school education, a year of skilled experience, and a year of foreign work experience, and you're thinking and contemplating what to do over the next year, continuing to work and learning French is the more competitive strategy. Now I wanted to run another scenario for those who don't want to learn French, have tried and aren't able to score the level 7. So in this example, if we have high school education, 1 year of Canadian work experience, and a 1 year post-secondary in a Canadian institution, so this is assuming that the person has applied for and secured a study permit, and it meets the eligibility criteria for points, or it meets the definition of an eligible credential under the ministerial instructions for the Express Entry ranking system. And I've also bumped up the foreign work experience to 3 years. So again, our individual's probably going to be a year older because they've studied. So instead of gaining the extra year of Canadian work experience, they've chosen to study full-time in person. And it's a 1 year credential, so 90 points. You see it's all the same here. The English scores, 40 points for Canadian experience. I mean, the person may still be working in Canada because some students are eligible to work part-time during their studies, but because they're a full-time student, the Canadian work experience gained while studying doesn't increase points here because that experience isn't eligible. We get 38 points for the skills transferability. And the reason it's lower than in this case is because, again, we're assuming 1 year of Canadian work experience instead of 2, but we've boosted the education. And then we get 50 points for foreign work experience. And in this scenario, we get 15 points for an eligible Canadian credential that's 1 or 2 years. And that brings us to 468 points. So you can actually see that in this scenario, the 1 year credential isn't sufficient to move the dial enough that an invitation to apply is likely. So what that means is if you're in the scenario where you have a year of Canadian work experience, high school education, and foreign work experience, you're going to need to learn French or pursue a program of study at an eligible program of study at an eligible post-secondary institution in Canada that's at least 3 years long. Now, another scenario that I ran was for those who have studied in Canada, have a bachelor's degree, and a year of Canadian work experience. I've assumed that in this scenario, since the individual has a bachelor's degree, that they probably came to Canada when they were quite young and likely didn't have a year of skilled work experience outside Canada prior to coming to study. So in this case, I've assumed they're between 20 and 29 and that they have a bachelor's degree or the equivalent of a 3-year credential, strong English, CLB 10 or higher, no French, 1 year of skilled Canadian work experience. And in this case, we get 38 points for the combination of a bachelor's degree and strong language skills and a bachelor's degree combined with 1 year of Canadian work experience. We also get 30 bonus points for the Canadian education credential. Now, that brings us to a score of 474, which we saw before, and I'll bring it up again, is not quite enough to get invited to apply. We're looking to get over the 500 mark. So, scenario 2, the same individual, they have a bachelor's degree, 1 year Canadian experience, and they decide to learn French. And they are able to score level 7. So again, I've assumed the same age, 20 to 29, bachelor's degree, strong English, CLB 10 or higher, CLB 7 in French, still 1 year of Canadian experience, and same skills transferability because we haven't changed the number of years of Canadian work experience. And now we get 30 points for the Canadian bachelor's degree and 50 points for the French language scores as long as they're CLB 7 or higher. So that brings us to 536, which in a regular draw is strong. And this person would be eligible to receive an invitation in a French category draw. So this substantially increases the individual's likelihood of getting an invitation to apply. The last scenario is for those who don't pursue the French language skills, and we assume again Canadian bachelor's degree. Now I've assumed 2 years of Canadian work experience and a year of foreign work experience. And the reason for that is I've made the assumption that from our baseline of having a year of Canadian experience, I've assumed that the individual has at least another year on their postgraduate work permit, or perhaps they're able to secure another work permit through other means, and that during that additional year of skilled work in Canada, the person is also working full-time remotely for a foreign company to gain a year of foreign work experience. So I actually need to reduce the age to 105 because it's going to be an extra year. The reason I didn't reduce the age here is because I'm assuming in this scenario 2 here, that the individual is able to score NCLC 7 on the French test in under a year. Whereas in this last scenario, scenario 3, I'm assuming that the individual needs to take another full year to gain a second year of skilled work in Canada, while at the same time working full-time remotely for a foreign company. So we're a year older, we lose 5 points, same education points, same points for English, 0 points for French, because we're trying to find an alternative. Is it possible to get an invitation to apply if you have a bachelor's degree without learning French? We get 50 points now for skills transferability education, and that's due to the extra year of skilled work in Canada. 50 points for foreign work experience, and that comes from having the year of foreign work experience combined with strong English skills, CLB 10 or higher, and then the 1 year of foreign work experience combined with the 2 years of skilled Canadian work experience. That's where the 50 points comes from, 25 points each. And then we also get 30 points still for the Canadian bachelor's degree. And that brings us to 544, which isn't bad. That's a relatively competitive score. If I look here, so we said 544, it's actually quite a competitive score. The most recent rounds were 534, and we see that here's one, 547, appears to be one of the only ones that is above what we have calculated here. So again, 105 points because we're assuming now that the person is 30 years old, still a bachelor's degree, 120, CLB 10 or higher on each of the language test areas, no French, 2 years of Canadian work experience, 50 points for having a bachelor's degree plus 2 years of Canadian work experience and a bachelor's degree plus CLB 10 in the language test, on the English test. And then we get 50 points for skills transferability, foreign work experience, 25 for the 1 year experience combined with 2 years of Canadian experience, and another 25 for the 1 year of foreign experience and scoring CLB 10 on the English language test. And again, the 30 points for the Canadian bachelor's degree. So if you've studied in Canada and you have at least a bachelor's degree or a 3-year post-secondary credential that is eligible, so typically that's from a public post-secondary institution and it's full-time with over 50% completed in person, then it is possible to position yourself competitively for an invitation to apply either by learning French or gaining a combination of the extra year of skilled work in Canada and a year of skilled work outside Canada. And finally, for those who are outside Canada wondering, do I have a chance of applying for permanent residence? I've run a few scenarios, starting with a candidate with a master's degree and 3 years of skilled work experience outside Canada. I assume that the person was 35 years old and with a master's degree receives 135 points. I've assumed that they scored CLB 10 or higher on their English test, no French, no Canadian experience, and a total of 100 points for their foreign work experience and education combined with strong language skills. But as we have seen before, 448 is not enough to be invited in a regular draw. And beyond that, without Canadian work experience, this person doesn't qualify for the Canadian experience class draws. So we are looking at a general draw. That last draw was in April 2024 and required a score of 529. And even if I search federal skilled worker, the last draw was 423. So it's not only unlikely that in this scenario, you would be unlikely to get invited to apply because of the score, but also by not qualifying in the Canadian experience class, there have not been rounds of invitation to invite people without Canadian work experience. Scenario 2, master's degree, 3 years foreign work experience, and a year of Canadian work experience, assuming that this person can obtain a work permit through some means. Now they are, so from 35 down to 72 for 36 years old, Their education is still a master's. Same language scores, no French, 40 points for Canadian experience, and we'd already maxed out the skills transferability, so that doesn't change. We're at 483 points. So the person has still a stronger chance of getting invited to apply because now they're eligible in the Canadian experience class with their 1 year of Canadian work experience. And we know that IRCC is prioritizing candidates with Canadian work experience, hence why there has not been a general draw that includes federal skilled worker or federal skilled trades in the past year or so. But based on the most recent historical draws, since the score is under 500, it's still not highly likely this person will get invited to apply. However, I would still recommend creating a profile because, again, we'd never know if the points are going to decrease. So, third scenario, this person learns French instead of gaining a year of work experience in Canada. I'm going to leave the age at 77 for assuming this person's 35 and doesn't have a birthday while they're learning French. They receive 135 points for education still for their master's, CLB 10, English 136 points. Now they receive 12 points for French, assuming they score NCLC 7. No points for Canadian work experience. And again, we're maxed out in the skills transferability, and 50 points for the French language skills. And that's CLB or NCLC 7. That brings us to 510. And as you'll recall, in the French language scores, mid 400s is a competitive score. So if you're outside Canada with 3 years or more of skilled work experience and a master's degree or higher, learning French as opposed to gaining Canadian work experience is a more competitive play. So to recap, for someone with high school education, learning French is going to be the strongest play, followed by studying in Canada at an eligible institution in a program that is 3 years or longer, and then gaining work experience again post-graduation. If you are a graduate of a bachelor's program with a year of work experience in Canada, it'll be possible to get an invitation to apply both by learning French or gaining another year of skilled work in Canada combined with a year of skilled work experience remotely for a foreign company. And depending on the speed with which you can learn French, the French play is going to be possibly faster. And we know that you have more of a buffer because both scenarios put you in the mid 530s, and with the French scores down in the mid 400s versus the Canadian experience class draws up in the low 500s. There's just more buffer that should things shift, should the pool become more competitive, you're in the safest position you could possibly be. So I would say French is the best play there as well. And finally, if you're outside Canada with master's or degree or more and 3 years or more of skilled work experience, and you're deciding between do I work in Canada or learn French, again, learning French is going to be the most competitive play. So I'm going to drop this spreadsheet into Navio HQ. Again, that is our free tools portal, and it includes tools like this as well as templates, guides, decision trees, and quizzes to help point you in the right direction, figure out your strategy, and accomplish your goals in Canada. So you can click the link in the comments and description below to access the free tools portal and on our Navio HQ, and I'll see you next time.